Good morning, friends. Good morning, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We're just getting started. I'm looking for my guest to join here, so I'll be on the lookout. How's everyone doing? Happy 2022. It's so weird saying 2022. I got to get used to saying that. All right, so cool. So I see we have several people in the chat already. Let me go ahead and recognize you. All right, Cynthia, thank you for joining. So good to see you. Andre, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. David, how's it going? So you said it's chilly and windy. My goodness. Yeah, it's freezing here. I'll give you all a temperature check here in a second. It's been ridiculously cold and varied perspectives. So many different ways to spell Terry, right? Happy New Year to you too. Yeah, I have a very positive outlook on 2022. I don't know. I just feel like there are going to be a lot of opportunities on the horizon. So, super excited about that. Let's see here. We have Trevor E. Clark. Welcome. Welcome, welcome. Good afternoon from New York. It's cold here. Oh, I bet. I bet. I don't know if your cold can match our cold though. we we have been staying in the negatives. I'm telling you. Alaska is just like, listen, y'all are gonna get all this cold, all this Arctic freezing weather. Okay, so I'm still checking out to see when my guest is going to join us. Uh, so I have someone who spent some time in Barrow, and he's going to be sharing his experiences. Um, but I guess what I could do while we're waiting for him to join is let's go ahead and go through a few housekeeping items real quick. So again, I set up this exclusive live, and what I mean by exclusive is that for those of you that want to participate in the chat, you have to have been a subscriber for at least 5 weeks. After you've been a subscriber for 5 weeks, then you can participate in the chat during the live stream. After the live stream is done, I always upload a replay, and you can put your comments down in the comment section. But just know that if you haven't met that criteria, you won't see your chat here on the live stream. All right, awesome. So we have here Pilot Pete. Good morning from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you too, Pilot Pete. And thank you so much for, I think that's a super chat. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Let's see here. So there's that. That's what makes this live stream exclusive. So like I said, I have a guest that's going to be joining us here in a bit. Yeah. We're running a little bit behind, but that's given me time to go ahead and cover what I want to cover ahead of time. Who spent some time in Barrow. It's going to be a conversation very similar to the one that I had with Vay, who spent some time in Healy, Alaska. I think it's going to be great to get perspectives from people that live throughout the state, because I haven't been to every city here, and I certainly haven't been to any of the rural villages. So I figure it would be better to hear from somebody who actually had that experience. And if you could please hit the thumbs up button as you're entering the live stream. That really helps me so that I show up in the algorithm. I'd appreciate that. And let's see. What else did I want to mention here? So yeah, yesterday's happy hour is rescheduled for next Friday. I had to do some overtime, y'all. I was not happy about it at all. But, you know, when duty calls, you got to pay the bills. You have to work overtime. So that's why I had to move that. Let's see. If you're not following me on Instagram, please follow me on Instagram if you have an IG account. My Instagram handle is Happy Girl Alaska, same as the channel. I've been getting more consistent with putting my post out there. Oh, and then I believe it was Jay Everyday who asked me about the membership tiers. They are done. If you go to my channel, you'll see that there's a join button now. And if you click that, you'll see the tier structure. I plan to do a whole introduction and all that good stuff. Probably, I want to say I want to have that ready by the time we have our next happy hour. So go ahead and check that out. And let's see. I think I covered everything just in time. Kevin just joined. Hi, Kevin. I'll go ahead and go through your bio first, and then I will add you to the live stream, okay? All right. So real quick here, before I read your bio, David, you said, let's see. David, your coworker was from Barrow, and she told you the dark winters are long and difficult. I can imagine. I can imagine. All right, Trevor, giving us the thumbs up. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So real quick, I'm going to read Kevin's bio. Kevin is a 26-year-old who describes himself as an amateur photojournalist. The purpose of his channel, and he does have a YouTube channel, we'll get into that a little bit later, as he would describe it, is to take people to places that they may be curious about. This can be anything from abandoned places of all shapes, sizes, and types, to small towns, to bad neighborhoods and rough areas, to some of the wealthiest places in the country and everything in between. There are upwards of 40,000 towns in this country, and Kevin's goal is to see and document as many of them as he possibly can. So far, he has filmed in 14 states. Kevin's day job is that of a therapist who specializes in addiction. Kevin also enjoys playing baseball and softball, hanging out with friends, and collecting music, among many other things. All right, so that was a really great bio. Kevin, I'm going to go ahead and add you to the stream here. All
sure
right,
thing.
you are. Welcome, welcome.
How's it going?
It's going well. How is your Saturday so far?
Oh, it's going good. It's going good. The first time I've ever really done a live stream, since that's never really been too much of a thing on my channel. But yeah, it's good. No complaints.
Well, I was just going to say, make yourself comfortable. No pressure. We do have some folks here in the chat. What I will do is I will try and monitor the chat. And if there are questions that come up, I will highlight those. So you don't have to worry about talking and also trying to monitor the questions that come in. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Okay. So Kevin, I'm thinking a really good place to start is, can you fill us in on your background, where you're from? Let's start there.
Sure. So, I'm from New Jersey, from the East Coast. I've lived here most of my life. I've lived in two other states, one for college and one for work for a little bit. But for the most part, I've lived in New Jersey. I work as a therapist. As I've said before, that's kind of my day job. My YouTube channel is kind of my second passion next to my work. I would say in a lot of ways very different from my work. But I enjoy both very much, and both are a very big part of my life. I mean, the YouTube channel thing started, I guess if I was to get into that, about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I was kind of just looking for I was looking for a hobby, something to get involved with. I never imagined how it would morph itself. And take itself to what it is today. The way the channel started 4 years ago is a lot different from what it is now. And I should also say I had a channel in high school that I had just thrown up like 3 or 4 or 5 videos on. Nothing had really come of it. I didn't really have any thoughts of doing anything with it. It was that channel that I had sort of resurrected and started anew. But what I had done back in high school, and I think even a little bit into college, was all just music-based, which is totally different, of course, than what I do now. And, those videos are still up on my channel. And if you go back far enough, it's something else. I'm not somebody who believes in deleting old videos. So I like the fact that they're still up there. But I guess if anybody wants a good laugh, they can go back and look at some of that stuff. So
it's so interesting, right? When you start your YouTube channel, like you said, you can kind of see the progression of your growth. And it's good to keep those videos up there. I know some of mine I have since marked as unlisted because I cringe when I look at some of the old ones. But I think that's cool that you left yours up there. And I think they're all really good. Now, I do have a question for you. So did your exploration of these different areas begin when you started your YouTube channel, or were you kind of exploring prior to that?
A little bit prior to that. So when I started my YouTube channel, that really kind of kicked it off. In college, I had really gotten into watching other people do exploration videos. I just gotten into YouTube in general. And there were a lot of different things that I watched. And I had the idea to start a channel before I even knew what it was going to be. And this has morphed into such a passion and a hobby. I don't think I would have enjoyed the other ideas that I had nearly as much. I had a background in writing. I almost completed an English minor in college, totally separate from what I do now. But I had the thought of doing music and album reviews at one time. I'm sort of glad that I moved on from that. As much as I love music, I'm glad that that's kind of just a hobby and not something that, because I don't know if I would have been able to do the same things and have the same experiences. I mean, even just the travel thing has really been such a big part of it. And I never intended it to be. Originally, the idea for the channel was just to do local stuff. And again, it's sort of morphed from there.
Well, I think it's really great to kind of lay the foundation and give us some insight into who you are, what was your motivation behind starting your channel, and your travels. So what I really think that we want to get into, because I've had so many questions about Barrow, Alaska. I'm curious to know, why did you choose Barrow out of all the other cities in Alaska?
Sure. So before I do that, there's a lot of light coming in the room. I'm just going to close the blinds behind me.
Sure. And so for the folks in the chat, feel free to pop a question in the chat box at any time. And I will monitor the chat and we'll bring those up. All right, Kevin.
Yeah. So why Barrow? As it stands, as I said, this channel has kind of morphed, and my expectations for this channel have kind of morphed over time. When I started this channel, I was thinking very small, and over time, those boundaries have increased. So I should say, I think to explain why I ended up going to Barrow, I have to explain, sort of how I've gotten here, so to speak. So everything that I started doing, again, was very local. Was my town, my county, stuff in New Jersey. Again, at first everything was local, and then started morphing out into doing stuff in the rest of New Jersey. Started finding myself to be what I would call a road warrior, somebody who enjoys, when I've got nothing else to do on a Saturday, or now that I plan it out, going for a 3 or 4 hour drive to go film something. I eventually started doing stuff in the tri-state area, which when I describe the tri-state area, I'm talking about New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania. It was all kind of around me. Then from there, it was sort of building out from there. I had these sort of reach places, these sort of things that I had in the back of my mind, it would be cool to go here. It would be cool to film this. The first, if you want to call it, really big trip that I ended up taking. I've done a lot of smaller trips, day trips, whatever. The first big trip that I ended up doing was Ohio, which was 2019, I want to say the summer of 19. I did Ohio, and basically my goal for that trip, again, was to document as much of, and it was, at that time, it was pretty much just abandoned things, as many abandoned things in Ohio as I could. So I basically spent 3 days sort of off the cuff, just driving around the state with no real plan and destination, kind of just feeling things out. Absolutely loved doing that. Took a smaller trip that winter to Massachusetts with the intent of doing the same thing. That trip was a total bust for various reasons. And I learned a lot from that trip, but complete and absolute bust. In fact, I think from that whole trip, there might only be There's only one video of note from that entire trip and like a couple of other little things, but I had like a dozen things planned and they all fell through. And then the next year in 2020, I ended up going to Oklahoma, which was the first time I had been like out west for filming. I had been out west before, but this was because I had been following blogs and reading different things about how many ghost towns there were in Oklahoma, like old oil boom, things like that. And I had it in the back of my mind that it would be cool to go to drive out in Oklahoma and, fly out to Oklahoma, rent a car and look at those ghost towns. But again, I thought it was out of my reach. I was able to do it. And I spent, I'm going to say it was like 5 days, maybe 6, out there filming ghost towns. That was an incredible trip. Totally different than Alaska, Oklahoma in the middle of the August, I think it was. That was an amazing trip. Saw some amazing things, met some very interesting people in some of these like little towns out in the middle of nowhere, out on the prairie. And then from there, did a couple of other trips this past year. But like my channel, I've started to see more coming from these bigger trips rather than the smaller things. And I had Barrow in the back of my mind as kind of my next reach destination after Oklahoma. I did a couple of other smaller trips before that. But I had seen videos. I've always been very fascinated with the Arctic. I've always been very fascinated with kind of the far north, so to speak. When I was in college, I actually had the opportunity to do some traveling in Kazakhstan. And Kazakhstan is a very, very cold place. So I guess that kind of implanted that interest in my mind.
Where is Kazakhstan? Where is that?
Sure. So that's in Central Asia. I didn't do any filming there. This was way before that. But I had done some traveling for something else in college. So that's in like the Mongolian region that is sort of below the center part of Russia and on the edge of the Middle East. Super fascinating place to go. But that was, something that really kind of sparked my interest for sort of, if you want to say, cold weather culture and people and even though Siberia isn't necessarily up north, I would say that the Siberian culture is very similar to Arctic culture from what I've read, and even a little bit of what I experienced.
What do you mean by Arctic culture?
I think just the way, and this is again was my own experience, the way that people interact with one another, the way that art and music and food and just the trying to think of the right word. The way that family is very important, the way that society is so attached to the weather because the weather is so significant. Living in a temperate area or living in a sort of a moderate climate, whether it's summer or winter doesn't really make that much of a difference. But if you live in the Arctic or if you live in Siberia, I mean, that's like everything. Like, you need to plan for the worst. And I think it creates a tougher and more resilient individual, at least from what I've seen.
You think the communities are a lot closer?
I would say so.
Yeah. I would think it would be important to know your neighbors, especially if you're facing hardships during the winter. Yeah. Okay. I never heard of that term, Arctic culture.
Yeah. I mean, that could just be a term that I made up. So
it sounds good. Okay. So you went to, is it Kazakhstan?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Specifically because you wanted to research or experience the cold, what did you call it? Arctic culture. And you decided to visit Barrow with that same thought in mind?
So I think that was actually not the reason that I had gone to Kazakhstan. I had gone to Kazakhstan because for a while when I was in college, I was thinking about becoming a missionary overseas somewhere. And that was an opportunity that came up. And it was basically, if you want to call it, somewhere between a tryout or a shadow of a missionary overseas. I had no specific, what do you want to call it? Motivation to go to any specific place. I just wanted to go wherever I felt I was being called, and that's where I ended up going. So I think that's where that fascination started, but that wasn't necessarily why I went. I went because I felt like it was the right thing to do at the time, and things ended up falling through. I ended up not going for the full year as was originally intended because of various other things, and then I ended up getting into career, and here I am today. But I would say that inspired the interest, and over the years since then, I had watched a lot of videos on YouTube, and there's a few creators that I follow who had filmed in Barrow, and for whatever reason, the way that they had presented Barrow had just interested me so much that I said, someday I'm going to get there. I didn't think it was going to be, last year. I had it on my mind that I was going to do it someday. And I think as my channel has kind of morphed into something that's not just abandoned places and more about people and towns and just regular places in general, I was like, well, this is a perfect opportunity to sort of fit it into that overall narrative.
And so were these people who actually live in Barrow, or they just visited?
There's one that actually lives there, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. I don't think his channel's active anymore, but I had seen some videos, and then the others had just visited Real Life Lore, Wendover Productions, and then the one that I'm thinking of is Borgios Photography. I think I'm saying that right. But those were the three that I had seen that really had inspired me to think about it.
Okay. And so what was it about those videos that you saw that drew you or compelled you to actually want to experience Barrow for yourself? What were some of the things that you saw?
Isolated, cold. The fact that the biggest thing for me was that it was the United States, but it also sort of wasn't. It was America, but not. It was a place that I don't think, that's not true. There's other places in America that would be so different from, what I'd be used to. There's tons of different cultures and cross sections and subsections, but that was just one that I guess had fascinated me because it was so different, and because thinking to myself how many people from New Jersey, had made it up to that point. Most people, when they go to Alaska, it's like either going on a cruise or lay over in Anchorage, but this was like taking it like 10 steps past that. And I would like to go back and see the rest of Alaska at some point, but I've got a few other things in mind before I end up getting back there. So
you actually spent a little time in Anchorage, right? I think they lost your luggage, and was that a long layover that you had here?
20 hours, I want to say.
Yeah.
So a little bit less than 24. Yeah, it wasn't crazy long. I would have loved to see the actual city. I didn't really have time to do anything because I was so concerned about my bags, other than take a little walk, but that was really it.
Yeah. And I was saying, when I watched that video, you were pretty brave walking around Spanard. I think that was the Spanard area that you were in. It can be kind of sketchy over there.
You think so?
It was interesting, though. There wasn't hardly anyone walking around.
Not how it usually would be?
No. No. Yeah. Okay. So I guess just to go into it a little bit deeper, you talked a little bit about the research that you did by way of watching YouTube videos. And I guess you weren't as much concerned with, well, maybe you did look at this, right? Did you go into looking at the cost of living? Because I know that you showed, you went to a grocery store and showed how expensive, right? Talk about sticker shock.
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
yeah. Did you look into the cost of living?
Well, I was there a little bit, not so much beforehand, because that was never really the intention. The intention was just to go and observe, I guess, what I would see as a visitor and how people live their daily lives. But, oh, forgive me, that's the house phone going.
That's okay.
Hopefully that'll stop. was I saying?
You said you went there with a thought in mind as a visitor.
Yeah. So really just with the intention of observing, I guess you would say as a visitor, as a neutral bystander, or as an observer. So more so just with the intention of seeing how people carry their day-to-day lives, but it wasn't really so much research for myself, I guess you would say. I wouldn't necessarily see myself living in a place like that long term.
Right.
Short term, I could see myself doing it if the situation ever arose. But I had seen, it seems like a lot of people, when they had talked about Barrow, it was the sticker prices of things in the community, different commodities, because everything has to be flown in. But yeah, no, I hadn't really looked too much into like apartment, like what rent would be, or what a home price would be. I would think pretty expensive.
Oh, but, yeah. I just kind of glanced over it a little bit. I haven't really gotten into it that much, but maybe that's something I'll take a look at just for the sake of sharing that information. So I'm curious, it didn't look like there was much to do in Barrow. So did you kind of have some things that you wanted to either see or do during your visit?
Sure. Well, I wanted to see the Northern Lights. That was one of the number one things on my list. Didn't happen. The weather conditions weren't up for it. I basically rolled the dice 4 nights in a row and lost. And the crazy thing is you have a better chance of winning than losing. So it's kind of just bad luck. That was a bit of a bummer. But again, is what it is. Got no control over that whatsoever. Seeing the sunrise and sunset was pretty beautiful. My main intentions of being there, again, were really just to observe the people in the place. I had actually stopped watching videos about Barrow for probably 3 or 4 months beforehand. I will say, like, when I go to film a place, there's a point where I kind of stop looking at things about that place, because I want it to be as fresh and as new to me as like it could possibly be, I guess. Even when, I do local stuff around here, like if I'm driving out to Pennsylvania or New York and I'm going to a place, I'll maybe look at a YouTube video that's recent just to see that the place is still there, so that I know I'm not wasting my time. And then I'll stop, because I don't want to ruin the experience for myself. So, there were a couple things that I wanted to see. I wanted to see the Arctic Ocean. Definitely wanted to see that, stand on the shore. There's a famous whalebone arch towards the outskirts of town. I wanted to see that. I wanted to go to the Heritage Center and learn a little bit about the, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the Inupiat people. And outside of that, it was really just kind of whatever else there was to see. I spent a large portion of those 4 days just wandering, I guess you would say, on the streets of the town, just to see what there was to see again. Yeah.
Did you interact with any of the locals?
A few. Yeah. Maybe not as many as I would have liked to. I think just with COVID being what it's been, it's a little bit.
Okay.
With strangers, and they're pretty tightly locked down in Barrow.
Right.
They're pretty tightly locked down. Yeah.
So would you say, are the locals friendly, or are they kind of standoffish?
I would say for the most part friendly. I think that there's probably some level of prevalence of mental illness in Barrow, unfortunately. Some homeless individuals or transient individuals with some forms of mental illness were definitely present. There was a couple of times walking down the street where I would have somebody yelling or screaming at me in the background. I can recall at least one time specifically, somebody who looked like they just were sort of out of it, unfortunately.
Did you ever feel unsafe?
Not too much, no. Because again, I've had experience traveling by myself in places that I don't know. Back in July of last year, I had visited what a lot of people would call the worst city in the United States, the most dangerous city, if you want to call that, Gary, Indiana. and, spending time in Newark, New Jersey and different places like that. I wouldn't say I necessarily felt in danger. I wouldn't necessarily say that. It's definitely something where in a situation like that, you want to be on your toes. But for the most part, everybody was so nice. For the most part, I didn't really have any issues at all. The locals that I talked to were extremely friendly and welcoming. And I even remember actually hitching a ride with a local the first day that I was there, which is kind of a funny story to go into, which I can go into in a little bit.
Okay. So I was wondering if someone was planning to visit Barrow, what type of budget should they plan for? Because I'd imagine the accommodations were probably a little more expensive too, right, than what you would normally pay, or were they reasonable?
Oh, they were definitely more. Definitely more.
Can you give us a range of like what you paid for your accommodations?
Sure. So, I think a large part of it depends on where you are coming from. Of course, coming from New Jersey, I spent more money than I would have spent otherwise. But a lot of people who might have seen my Barrow stuff don't realize that I had actually done 2 trips in one. So that Barrow trip had been preceded by several days in New Mexico, of all places. So I had done some filming out in New Mexico, which was totally different than what I did in Barrow. So that was just like me kind of trying to get the most bang for my buck. If I'm already out west, and already taking time off of work, let me try to go to these 2 different states. And I had, also trying to fly somewhat budget. I had tons and tons of layover stops. I mean, I think I totaled that entire trip. I had like 10 legs of flying, which is just insane. But that was also including New Mexico and doing the stuff down there. So, Jersey to New Mexico to Alaska, Alaska to Jersey.
So did you stay in a hotel, an Airbnb?
In Barrow, I stayed in a hotel. I might still have the paper on me somewhere, if I'm not mistaken. So Barrow, I've always preferred hotels. That's just me personally. I kind of like the hotel thing. I'm not a big fan of, being a house guest, so to speak. Staying in an Airbnb, staying with people I don't know. I'd much rather have my own room and just be left alone. So I've always preferred the hotel thing. There's 2 hotels in Barrow. There's one that's kind of more like a mom and pop motel, and the other one is more of a standard hotel.
Probably not the Hilton or the Marriott or anything like that, though, right?
The Hilton or the Marriott, but not bad. Really not bad at all.
Okay. No. Do you mind sharing about how much you paid for a 4-day stay?
So I guess it was 4-day, 3-night. I believe it was in the 2s. I want to say, let's say between $250 and $270 a night, if I can remember correctly. So definitely more expensive than you'll be paying anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I stayed in an incredibly nice hotel in Anchorage for like a third of that price. So definitely on the pricier side there. The food wasn't as pricey as I was expecting it to be completely honest.
Okay.
Definitely more, but not even as much more as the grocery store would indicate.
Interesting.
I would say maybe based on what I would be expecting to pay back in New Jersey, or based on what you would be expecting to pay average wise, maybe 40% more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did they have that many restaurants there?
Yeah, there were a couple of really good restaurants. Now, the one thing there, again, with the COVID regulations the way they were, I don't know how they are right now. I don't know if they had seen a uptake in cases right before I went, and that's why things were a little bit different. But all restaurants were doing takeout only. So there was no sitting in any of the restaurants. So it was all either takeout and take it back to my hotel room or have it delivered. I found it very interesting there because there's a couple local taxi cab companies that do all the driving for people in Barrow, because I guess a lot of people don't bother to get a car because why
I was
even
just
bother?
going to ask about transportation. Yeah.
Yeah. So these taxi cab drivers, the companies would also pick up food deliveries. So I guess they had contracts that there might have been 3 companies. Each one of them had contracts with different restaurants. So the drivers were driving people and food, which that was kind of interesting.
Wow. So it's like Uber Eats or something like that.
Yeah, definitely not Uber Eats, but a more rustic version of that.
Yeah.
You want to say. But in terms of food, there were 3 places that I very much enjoyed. There were a couple of other places I could have gone to, but 3 places that were the most convenient that I remember enjoying the most. I know the hotel that I stayed in, Top of the World Hotel, had a restaurant. I didn't get a chance to eat there. I think I had coffee there, but I didn't get a chance to eat there. And I know there were a couple of other places on the other side of town, which would have been just way too far to walk. I know that, interestingly enough, there were 2 chains in Barrow. There was, I believe it was Chase Bank and Subway. Those were the only 2 chains I saw in Barrow.
I thought you'd say McDonald's for sure, but McDonald's hasn't made their way up there yet, right? I'm sure it's coming.
Subway. I actually believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Subway's overtaken McDonald's worldwide in number of places. I think I'd read that somewhere. So
I wouldn't doubt it.
Yeah.
Well, you know what, Kevin? Let's go to the chat real quick to see what questions we have. All right. So Trevor has a question. Are most of the residents in Barrow permanent lifelong residents or temporarily in Barrow for a work assignment? How much time did you spend in Barrow?
Sure. I would say that most of the people that I encountered were there permanently. I'm sure there were some temporaries. I didn't meet any temporary people. I know there are jobs that would probably have you up there temporarily, but everybody that I met was permanent. Now, maybe during the summer, you'd be more likely to see some temporary people. You know, I was there sort of on the cusp of winter. But yeah, I didn't meet any temporary people. Everybody who was settled down there seemed to have their roots there. Very few people, it seemed, were moving there. You know, I didn't meet a whole lot of people who were like, I lived here and now I live in Barrow. It was more like, well, my family's lived here for generations. We've just always been here. I had one person that I spoke to on the plane on the flight from Anchorage to Barrow who grew up there, and she was going back to visit family. And interestingly enough, now she lives and works in Las Vegas, which to me is like the polar opposite.
It is, yeah.
So I found that very fascinating that somebody would, I guess in to a certain degree enjoyed that lifestyle, but also wanted to get away from it, so much so that they did the exact opposite,
Right.
So.
To go from such a small community to Vegas. I mean, yeah. Let's see here. So Andre said, Top of the World Hotel is the best hotel in Barrow. I believe that's where you stayed, right, Kevin?
That is where I stayed. Yeah. I'd be interested to know if he's been there. Yeah, it's a very nice hotel.
Yeah, Andre, have you stayed at Top of the World? Andre, he travels or he visits Alaska quite a bit.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So what about the social scene?
Sure.
Here's the thing though, right? Because you went during the time of COVID. So it would probably be a lot different under different circumstances, right?
Absolutely.
But do you kind of want to speak to that a little bit? Were there, I don't know, bars or?
Sure. Yeah, no, I'd be happy to get into that. First, I think I wanted to just kind of double back on the restaurants. So there were 3 restaurants that I tried that were really good. There was a Filipino restaurant of all things that was fantastic. There was a Mexican restaurant that was really, really good, believe it or not. And there was a pizza place. I only remember the name of the pizza place, but I'm sure the other 2 are the only 2 that you would find in that town. But the pizza place was called East Coast Pizza, and it was actually surprisingly good. I come from New Jersey, right near New York.
Right.
I mean, we always say we have the best pizza in the country, and I can stake a claim to that. But it was different, but it was good. It was surprisingly good. Coming back to the social scene, other than a couple of bars, and I didn't go into any, and I don't even think these bars would have been open because of COVID. Because Barrow's not really a place where you're going to have like outdoor seating or anything like that.
Right.
It's just gosh darn cold. I don't think these bars would have even been operating, but I had walked past one or two bars that probably would be open if it wasn't for COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I would think just small, sort of local type things, nothing like, you're not going to go there and find nightclubs or anything like that. It's not that kind of place. That's not what the locals would even want. I would think I would think the social scene there consists mostly of cultural activities centered around the native culture. And just, tightly bonded communities of families and friends, more so than like going out and meeting strangers at the bar or at the club.
Yeah, I could see that. Cool. So Andre says, let's see. No, not yet, but did a lot of research on Barrow. We'll visit soon. Very nice. Andre, I think you have a YouTube channel too. I have to double check and see. I don't know if it's still up, but I'll go and check it out. Okay. Let's see here. Do you want to talk about the darkness? Because I believe that Barrow is one of those places where they can get into 24 hours of darkness, no daylight whatsoever. Was that happening during your visit?
No, but it was close. So when I went, and I had timed this out as well. When I went, I think they were 2 weeks from total darkness.
Yeah.
And the total darkness is like 65 days or something like that.
Right.
So when I was there, if I'm not mistaken, I think the sun was rising at about 10:45 and setting at about 3, I want to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
how did you cope with that? Did it affect you at all?
Yeah. Oh, it most certainly did. Spending most of the time in the dark. Another reason why I don't think I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
It actually kind of reminded me a lot. So when I was in college, going to school to be a therapist like I am now, I was working overnights at a facility, a treatment facility. And just overnights. I don't know anybody in the chat's done overnights, but overnights are brutal. I was doing 7 to 7, and I felt exactly like that. You're a creature of the night, and that's never been me. I've always been a early riser type person. So to be, waking up at 3 or 4, getting ready, going to work for 7, coming home exhausted 12 hours later, and going to sleep, like it was just weird. It was super weird. So this felt like that. Definitely felt like that. I don't think I could do it long term, though I'd be interested to see it on the flip side. I think, honestly, if I was to ever go back to Barrow, I'd go during the summer just to see what 24 hours of daylight looks like, because I can't even imagine.
Oh, it's amazing. You will love it. You would love it. I'm telling you. Yeah.
What's that look like in Anchorage? I mean, do you guys get the full swing, or do you guys get close, or like what is that?
Yeah, we get pretty close. It's interesting when you said that. So I want to say the last time that I checked the sunrise and sunset, our sunset was somewhere around, or sunrise was somewhere around 10:30 a.m. And then our sunsets would be as early as 3:30 p.m.
Okay.
But we don't get into the 24 hours, thank God. It feels that way.
Yeah. I bet it does.
Yeah, because you leave for work, it's dark. You come home, it's dark. So, yeah, so I can't imagine living in Barrow. I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know how they deal with it. Did you get to speak to the locals and ask how do they cope with that?
It didn't really seem to be something that bothered them that much.
I think I lost your audio.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's just something that they're so used to, that it doesn't really, it's just kind of the way that they've always been. I do regret one of the groups, well, a couple of the groups of people that I really wanted to talk to. I wanted to talk to one of the police officers. Didn't get a chance to do that. Or one of the firefighters, EMT. Didn't get a chance to do that. Or one of the teachers at one of the schools. Didn't get a chance to do that either. Those were three groups of people that I would have loved to talk to just to learn more about local life.
Yeah, I hear that quite a few of the members of their police force or the emergency medical staff are volunteers. They may not necessarily have like the, proper training, but because they have such a shortage of people there.
Yeah.
I've heard about that in some of the other villages. I don't know if that's true for Barrow or not. Yeah, that would be interesting to get their perspective, though.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't know anything about the volunteer thing.
Yeah.
I wonder how that flies because, every state has their own requirements and their own, like Alaska has to have some sort of standard that all officers are held to. So I wonder what that would.
Maybe they're not called officers. Maybe they're called something else.
Could be peace officers. That's a term commonly used.
Yeah,
to describe
mm-hmm.
people in that category.
Yeah, and the culture is so different.
Definitely. Yeah. I actually have a very, very small background in law enforcement, which is a whole nother thing. Before I became a therapist, I had wanted to be a cop. And that was my first, that was what so I went to college twice, I guess if you were to say, and I finished a bachelor's degree in criminal justice and started working. I'd actually gotten hired to be an officer in Washington, D.C. And started training, and I dropped out within 1 week of academy. So,
geez.
Just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a little bit. I know a little bit more than
everything. All right, very cool. Let me see here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I wanted to ask you about. Was there anything in particular that you really did not care for while you were visiting Barrow?
The one thing, and I'm sort of hesitant to say it, was the wind. I'm somebody who doesn't mind the cold at all. I've definitely experienced it from different angles. Of course, what we get in New Jersey is nothing like what you guys get in Alaska. We, curse global warming, we just got our first real snowfall of the season, just yesterday. So we actually have some snow on the ground now, which is great. I love it. But the one thing that Barrow definitely has an abundance of is wind. It's got to be one of the windiest places I've ever been. And that was just consistent the whole time I was there. Still calm, cold, never really bothered me that much. But that wind is like a knife ripping through your, I don't know what the wind situation is like in Anchorage, but this was pretty nasty.
Did you have the proper gear?
Yeah, I would say so. I was well stocked with what I needed. I didn't feel like I was wanting for anything while I was there. I had it pretty well planned out. So I've been in cold places before, just never that far up in Alaska.
Yeah, that's good because that's a question that always comes up. People want to know, depending on what time of the year, how should you dress? And the thing is, it depends on which city you're visiting.
Of course. Layers, definitely layers.
Absolutely. Can never go wrong with a pair of thermals.
Thermals do wonders. And, I'm a firm believer in thermals because, you wear them outside and they cling to your skin and they keep you warm. And then when you're wearing them inside, if you say you're walking to work and you're wearing thermals, you get inside and it's not really that bad. You don't feel like you have an extra layer on. So I think thermals do wonders, really.
They really do. They really do. So I'm looking here at the chat to see if any more questions are rolling in. I don't see anything yet. And we have about 10 minutes remaining, Kevin. I didn't want to keep you too long. Is there anything that you wanted to share with us as far as Barrow is concerned? Anything else? One of my questions was, if you could give someone advice if they're planning to visit Barrow, what would it be, or do you have any advice?
Giving somebody advice, somebody who would be going to Barrow. I guess it would depend on the purpose,
Mm-hmm.
Figure out why you're going there. And, if somebody was going there to do the same thing that I did there, I think even looking back just a couple of months ago, I can think of ways that I could have done what I did better. But, I think that's the human tendency is to always be our own harshest critic. I can think of things that I would have liked to film more or ways that I could have filmed better because, I still have a lot to improve on in terms of technique because everything I've learned to this point has been self-learned. But just in terms of advice for somebody, not a whole lot. Everything was pretty straightforward. Maybe go with an open mind. Try and soak in as much of the culture as you can, because I feel like that's the significance of a place like Barrow.
I think your audio cut.
Oh.
Okay. All right. So what were you saying? You saying go with an open mind, try to experience the culture as much as possible.
Yeah. I think that was pretty much all I had. Not a whole lot of other things that I can think of. I think also anytime going somewhere yourself is always better than reading about it,
right?
Or watching videos about it, because you can go in with preconceived notions, or you hear what other people have to say about something, or if I'm reading a source about somewhere that I'm going to go see, there might be some sort of bias in the source that I'm reading. Or they might have their own preconceived notions about the place, but like going yourself is always going to be a totally different experience than reading about it. I know I read about problems, and there were rumors that I read about Barrow long before I went that I didn't experience at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's definitely.
Do you want to share some of those rumors, or are they?
Sure. Yeah. One of the biggest ones that I had heard, which is kind of funny in retrospect, but wouldn't know how to take it if I had never been, was that polar bears roam the town. Totally not true. A lot of people were saying that. Absolutely 100% false.
Now, see, that would be a big deterrent for some people, right? Because they'd be afraid they go face to face. Yeah.
But that's totally not true. And even just the idea that it's like this completely rustic place, and like you're not going to find the same things that you would find, like your same luxuries. I mean, you can find them. They're there. The one thing I will say, as weird of a thing as this might be to say, in terms of health, it seemed like the health, how do I want to say it? Health practices didn't seem to be the greatest out there. I don't know if that's a common thing in some of those smaller towns, but
do you have an example?
Sure. There were a lot of individuals that appeared to be.
Oh, we lost you again, Kevin.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There were a lot of individuals that appeared to be walking around, visibly. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but individuals that I saw that appeared to be visibly intoxicated. People who might have had problems with drinking. And again, not necessarily speaking as a lay person, but speaking as somebody who in my professional life has treated alcoholics. I can usually spot one a little bit better than the average person can. Tons of people smoking, like more so than I think I've ever seen anywhere else that I've ever been.
I would think by it being so cold, so people were standing outside smoking.
You would think so. And that's what I would have thought too. And that was not the case at all. I mean, like everybody. It was insane. I can't recall ever being somewhere where it was that much. So that was just a mild observation, but seemed to be kind of interesting to note.
Gotcha. It looks like we do have couple questions. Let's see. So, Andre, did you get a chance to put your feet in the Arctic Ocean?
That probably would have required taking off my boots and my thermals and my socks. So no.
Yeah.
Plus, now there was a lot of ice around there. I would have probably had to walk out a little bit on the ice to put my feet in the Arctic Ocean, and I wasn't about to do that. So no.
Right. And you may have lost a toe or two. Okay, here's another question. Did you need a tour guide to get around, or you were about to walk around freely, and did you have to be concerned about polar bears roaming around? Okay, so you kind of spoke to that. Yeah. About the polar bears.
Tour guide, no. I know that is something during the summer where you can get tours of the town. I didn't do that while I was there. And walking around freely, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what I did the whole time I was there. Now, if I had had a little bit more money for the trip, maybe I could have splurged on a cab a couple more times and seen the outskirts of the town, because the town was a little bit bigger than I thought it was going to be. And from the hotel, it's a much further walk to get to the other side of town, where there were some other things that I didn't get a chance to see. But yeah, I mean, everything I did on foot. Outside of that, polar bears roaming around the town, no. I had heard a lot about that before I went, but that was not that was not a thing while I was there. And to take it a step further, there actually, I had heard from a local, or maybe it was the one of the housekeepers at the hotel, that they actually have a dedicated patrol that's separate from the police, that actually patrols the shoreline to scare away any polar bears. So if that even was a concern, they've basically got a 24-hour patrol doing that anyways.
Gotcha.
Which I found to be interesting, because I never actually saw anybody, but this is something that appears to be like a thing that everybody knows locally, that like that's not really going to be a concern. So I guess whatever they're doing, it's working. So, I mean, you wouldn't even really want the bears in town anyways, but then they would start to cohabitate, and then that becomes a whole issue with food and let alone the fact that they're very, very, very aggressive. But yeah.
So you said that you wouldn't visit Barrow again in the winter time. If you did visit, maybe you would come back in the summer to experience summer there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not to say that it wouldn't be interesting to see it even colder than it was when I was there, because when I was there, believe it or not, it was unseasonably warm. And I've always had a fascination with sort of pushing my limits. It would have been cool to be there when it was 40 below, just to see what that felt like. I mean, I think the coldest temperature I've ever experienced in my life was 22 below, and that was in Siberia.
Okay.
I remember what that felt like. So it'd be interesting to take it a step further, more just for bragging rights, and just for the fact that I'd put up a video that of me in 40 below, and that would just be something cool to hold on to.
Right. How cold was it in Barrow during your visit?
While I was there, so I was there in the beginning of November.
Yeah.
It was unseasonably warm while I was there. That's what people were saying, and what it appeared. I saw everything from, I think 21 might have been the warmest that I saw while I was there, and the coldest might have been around 0. So I don't think it ever dipped below 0, but wind chill was definitely well below 0. I mean, that wind was vicious. So yeah. Did you freeze?